Well, good morning, everybody. Morning. My name is Dan. I'm a weekend guy. I work Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Not quite sure what I do.
Nobody is.
He is.
He just showed up one day. We started paying.
Well, that's a story. I don't think they're paying me. But anyway, this is Dave Taylor. He is our illustrious leader. He is the service manager, fixed operations dude. Been with us forever. Between the two of us, we've got about 70, 75 years experience in the industry. And we're here to give you information. It's driven by your questions. We have a rough format, but we'd like to have people ask questions. We're not here to sell you anything, but we will suggest things. Other dealers do what we do. We just have to find one you trust. So ask questions. We'll get moving. This one is on electrical. I do the batteries. He does a lot of the other stuff. So how many of you folks, you're mostly motorhomes? You have a trailer. Okay. How many people have fifth wheels and trailers? Okay, 4, 5, 6. Okay.
How many big diesel motorhomes? How many pushers?
I'm still working on them. So
What was the question again, dude?
How many people have diesel pushers?
Diesel pushers.
You're gonna have to speak up, Danny.
So do you want to? Yeah, I got rid of mine.
Yeah. I've got to shut mine off. Unless we have another plant fire or something, I'll be staying right here.
So this is one that it is focused primarily on the electrical systems of your coaches. The newer coaches have more sophisticated systems than the older coaches. If you have a coach pre-2007, your power supply is going to be one of the old ferrule resonant taper charge. If you leave it plugged in unattended for 2 weeks, you'll have a hole where your batteries work. The newer stuff, come on in. There's an issue with these seats, so you might want to sit on that. I didn't work.
Oh, that was good. I like that.
Yeah.
Now he's, they moved over.
They were so nice they split it.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
still ahead.
Man.
So anyway, the newer coaches are, they have power supplies that will shut off before they overcharge the batteries. So the first part of this seminar is what happens when you plug your coach into 110. Before we get into that, there's a misnomer on a lot of coaches that have 50 amp service like this Dutch stuff. It says on the outside, like fifth wheels and that this is 220, 50 amps. It really is not 220, and all you have to do to verify that is plug your 50 amp service into a welder or a dryer outlet, and what it does is it sends 120 volts up the ground wire, and even though it's turned on, the appliance is turned off, it's got 110 coming up through the back door, and it'll fry everything in your coach. What you have in a 50 amp service is 2 legs of 110 that are in phase. Yes, ma'am.
Can you speak up just a bit, please?
He'll try. He's soft-spoken.
I know he is.
I really want to say, I'm sorry, yes, I'll do the best I can.
Thank you.
I just have a big stick. walk softly, big stick. So anyway, when you plug into 50 amp service, you're plugging into basically two 30 amp services. You have two legs of 110 in phase. It's just a way to get more current off of two wires than just trying to wad it all up on one wire. You have to be very careful about that. We make a lot of money rewiring coaches after people do that. I'm not going to say anything about these two.
Okay, let's just see.
I just lost.
Oh, hold on, I just had somebody switch sides.
Because the system, 50
Well, I brought this for that reason. The customer, the gentleman's question is, if you plug into 50 amps and you drop it down to 30, and your question is,
well, only one of my air conditioners work, but I've never had a problem.
his comment is, when he does this, only one of his air conditioners works. What happens is you have two legs in a 50 amp service. If you were to cut this in half, there's only 3 wires. So the B leg is actually, there's nothing there. There's no wire connected to it. So it's only, if you go from a 50 to a 30, you're picking up current off of only one leg. This leg, there's no wire coming down. They're not connected together or anything. You have neutral ground and one leg. When you have a 50 amp service in your coach, it is wired that your primary appliances are in your A leg. And you'll have one air conditioner, you'll have your converter, your power supply, and your refrigerator and things like that. In your second leg, you'll have the second air conditioner, the electric side of your water heater, your washer dryer, things like that. So they split the load so that when you neck it down from 50 to 30, you can only use half your appliances. That's the way RVs are wired. Any other questions on that? Yes?
Essentially, if you plug in, that's a 50 amp regular plug for an RV right there.
Yes.
So if you plug into that, it's a standard 50 amp plug that has two options, two neutrals, all rated all out.
We have a neutral and a common and an A leg and a B leg. Yeah.
But that's standard house wiring too, isn't it, for a 50 amp breaker?
Well, if you look at a breaker, the distribution panel goes like this. If you hook up 2 wires, or a double breaker, one is going to pick up current from the A leg of the box, the other one's going to pick up from the B leg. And your house is 220, and that means you have out of phase. So if you just plug into your dryer cord, it has 2 hot legs, 110, but they're out of phase. What means one is pushing when one's pulling, and you have a potential, they're going like this constantly to my brain, I don't know what it is. I washed my hair about a week ago. Anyway.
He hasn't cut it for years.
Got to do it once in a while. Anyway, they're out of phase to make it more efficient. So to answer your question, when you neck it down, when you plug into 220, you're only picking up one leg, that's safe. But if you plug into 220 and you don't neck it down, one side of your distribution panel in your coach is going to be one phase, the other side is going to be the other phase, and they backfeed through the ground. Does that answer your question? Kind of not?
Not really.
Try it again.
Well, when I wire plug in my garage, my shop for my RV, and I used a double
Right.
breaker, and it seems to work fine.
Because you're running a double breaker. A shop.
It's basically 220.
Well, it's basically 220, but it's not split. if you run, if a shower or a welder outlet has one volt. So it's actually it's 240 is the actual.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you run that, you're taking, if you run a plug through an RV through a house plug, you're actually getting 240 volts. Because of the way it's wired, your neutral turns into a hot wire. And when you hit everything in a motor, when you hit the neutral wire in a motorhome with 120 volts or 240, it just starts, it takes everything out within a second. Air conditioners, refrigerators, microwaves, televisions. It is wired different. It's too hard to drop, but if you
So
get on it.
when you wire this in, you're gonna use 2 separate breakers.
The way I tell people to do it is buy one 50 amp breaker, single leg breaker, and run the red and the black wire into that one breaker so you know they're in phase. I've heard guys tell me this before, and my patent answer is you're just bloody lucky, because we have every year 10, 15 people come in that have plugged into their buddy's dryer cord, or they plugged into an outlet that the buddy of theirs wired, and they wired at 220. So why you got away with it is probably because the way they isolated your two sides of your 50 amp service. And sometimes they do it where you can get away with this, but not very often. So I'm going to say you're lucky. We get a lot of people that aren't lucky, and it's thousands of dollars because we have to replace all the appliances.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
like a power spike.
This might sound really basic, but so we have 30 amp coach. When we are, like where we are right now, there's only a 50 amp plug. It doesn't, like some places we stay, there's
A 50 amp
switches, a
30.
50 and a 30.
Yeah.
So, and we have surge protector, et cetera. But does it matter that we're plugged into a 50 when it's only a 30? That, I know it sounds kind of basic, but.
So the lady's question is, they have a 30 amp service. Their cord looks like this 3 legs.
Yeah.
A lot of campgrounds that they're in, all that is available is the 50 amp. When you plug a 30 in and you neck it down, which is what this does,
Yeah, that's what we have.
yeah, what you're doing is you're only picking up power from one leg, because the red wire, which is the B leg, there is no wire here. There's only 3 wires in this.
Okay.
So it's just a dummy.
So we're okay.
You're fine.
Okay.
That's what this is for. It doesn't even bother. Are you looking for a walk? Oh, okay. It doesn't matter. We don't get into that side. So that's what these are for. They're designed to just pick up the one leg.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Going back to your 50 amp service,
Uh-huh.
coming into a panel and 2 legs. And so if only one of them is hot, you're only getting some of the appliances, not all the appliances. If reversing your situation, if I plug into 30, but I'm still getting full service through the coach, so somehow that 30 is powering both sides of the panel, right? I mean, obviously it is.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
not sure why it's different.
yeah. So this customer, this gentleman's question is, he has a 50 amp service. He plugs into 30, but both sides still work. And the answer is your coach is wired incorrectly, and it's allowing power to come over to both sides of the distribution path. And what brand is it?
The carrier.
They were really good products. I really liked her.
But you have to use your adapter to plug in, right? And these adapter cords to plug in the 30. Yeah. And the adapter cord is what converts it, right? The 30 to 50, instead of 50 to 30, you're going to do 30 to 50.
So if we had the one that was a male 30 to female 50,
Yeah.
again, that's only 3 wires. So what's happening is happening inside his carriage in his distribution box. It's allowing current to go to both sides. And a lot of times, it's just the different manufacturers have different attitudes about how they wire things. In your case, it's allowing you the freedom to use what you want, but it's also giving you an opportunity to overload your system. And one of my many soapboxes issues is people buy these little cube heaters. Oh, they're cute little things, they'll heat a little bit. One of those little cube heaters will consume half of a 30 amp service. And a lot of times people come in with a cord and they've got it adapted down from like 30 to 15, and the ends are all melted here. And they say, well, we just have the refrigerator on and the converter going and this one little heater. Well, the refrigerator is 6 amps, the converter's, and it probably is down to an amp or two, but the heater's 15 amps, 13 to 15 amps. So you're trying to run over 20 amps through a 15 amp, and if the wall outlet breaker doesn't pop, this thing will just start melting because you have way too much current. And any connection where you have, this isn't the best connection. It's easy, but it's not real tight. So anytime you have a connection like this that is loose, that creates heat. And if it's like you have this lamp cord you're trying to run your air conditioner on, it melts the wire. We used to have, over in Idaho, we'd have people in the wintertime, they'd be out there with their RV and their short cords laying there. There's a foot of snow, but the cord's melted all the way down into the ground because it's so hot from the amount of current. It's not a good thing. Did that answer your question?
Say it's
Oh.
50 amp 120.
I'm sorry?
It's 50 amp 120, it's not 50 amp 220.
It's
right there,
Well,
right?
they're single phase, dual phase.
yeah. 220s dual, 240s dual phase.
But motor home, they're wired for 250 amp 120 volt power.
Yes. Both legs, the black and the red, are the same phase.
Right.
One's 30 and one's
It's
25 to 30.
220 volt power, it's not, it's 50 amp
Yeah.
120 volt power.
Yeah. These coaches, and here's the bottom line. It's been raining. I know that doesn't happen around here, but you walk up to the coach and it's been raining and you grab the assist handle and your hair turns curly and then starts smoking because you have a neutral issue and it's running through you instead of through the wire. So they said, well, it's okay to do that with 110 because all it's going to do is kind of bite you. But if you do it to 220, you won't be able to let go of it and it'll stop your heart. So for safety reasons in our industry, in the early mid-70s, while he was still in junior high and I was working in the RV industry, they passed a law that says you cannot put 240 volts in an RV. That's law because we don't want to kill people. A very sad but kind of funny story, these people had this little dog, big fifth wheel, and they said they brought it in for service, and she said, you know, it's really weird. I hooked my dog up to the handle, he's got a little metal chain, and he stands there and quivers and yelps. And if he doesn't quite stand just right, he yelps. That poor dog was being electrocuted. But it was 110, so all it would do is bite, it wouldn't kill him. Now, if it was 220, they'd have whacked him hard fast. Any other questions before we move on? We don't do this electrical seminar too often, you can tell.
Once a year.
We're going to talk about batteries now. That's my part, and then it's all yours. When you plug into 110, if you have a coach with a big inverter, the inverter automatically switches over to be a battery charger. It looks at the potential of the battery and it determines whether it needs to turn its charge circuit on or not. If you have a trailer or fifth wheel or a smaller coach that does not have an inverter charger, then the converter comes on and it puts out a certain potential. I learned this from this gentleman, a fully charged battery, 12 volts, is rated at 12.6 volts. 6 cells, 2.1 volts per cell. If you have a half-discharged battery, what do you think the voltage is of a half-discharged battery?
12 volts.
12 volts. I get calls all the time, well, I've got 9 volts in my coach, but nothing works. Fully charged battery, 12.6 volts. Half-charged battery, 12 volts. Technically, in our industry, the automotive industry, a dead battery is
Less than half full?
how much?
Less than half full?
Yeah, well, called a discharged battery, 11.4, 11.5 volts. If you have a slide room, the newer stuff built in the last 15 years or so, people ask this question a lot. When you're running this room out, you push the button, there is a control module that samples the amount of amperage on the motor. When that motor is running at full voltage, 13 and a half volts when you're plugged in or the generator is running, it's running about 6 amps, it comes to the end, it stops, and the motor loads up and the amperage starts to go up. At that moment, the control module says, oh, time to shut it off. Let's say that you go in there and you've got about 11 volts. Ohm's law tells us to get the same amount of potential out of that electricity. If you're at 11 volts, you've got to have about 9 amps. But the module that controls the slide says, wait a minute, I can't have 9 amps. And so you run about 6 inches, it shuts down. You run about 6 inches and it shuts down. We tell people when they buy a coach from us or we're working on their coach, you need to make sure that when you're going to run the rooms in or out, when you run in the jacks and the other electronics, you need to make sure that your potential is at least 12 volts. If you plug into 110, run the generator, or start the engine, you're going to be about 13 and a half volts. And then your modules that control your motors can function properly. Room's going to go all the way out, and it's going to stop, and it's because that's the power that it was calibrated to. Same with your jacks. All of your appliances, like your refrigerator, they shut down at 11 volts. They just flat won't work. Very interesting. Any questions on that part? Yes.
Yeah. Your jacks and your slides are working off your house batteries, basically.
Question that the gentleman has here is the jacks, the slides, are they working off the house battery? For the most part, that is yes. If you have a fifth wheel, obviously, or a trailer, they all work off the same battery. In a motorhome, you have chassis and you have coach batteries. And I'm hesitating a little bit because some Thors in Winnebago will wire their jacks to the chassis side. And then you have to have the engine running to do that. Now, Newmar products, up until this year, you had to have the generator or the short cord on because you couldn't start the engine because that would default the slide. They didn't want the engine running, but in 2019, you can start the engine, and the thing that defaults or jacks your slide is the park brake. And so it makes it easier. But all these manufacturers are designed to operate, for the most part, off your house batteries. So you've either got to be plugged in, or you've got to have the generator running, or you've got to have a lot of nice solar. Yes, sir.
Just a question, we have fifth well, so, would not the opening up the slide and the jack at the same time, is that reasonable express in the system?
The last part was that
If you open up the slide, you take a certain amount of amps, and the jacks,
right.
should that not be happening at the same time?
The gentleman's question is, can the systems for the slide room and the jacks be run at the same time? This is a very good question, and the answer is, you probably could, but they put the jack control over here on the dash, and they put the slide room way over there for a reason. Too much current at one time, but the real thing is which came first, the chicken or the egg? A lot of manufacturers say, way back when, you level the coach, then you put the rooms out. No. You put the rooms out, then you level the coach. Nowadays, it's pretty straightforward. In a 1998 Pacero, I could stick my hand all the way in, past the wipe seal between the slide room and the cutout. Huge gaps, and the rooms would move a lot. So they didn't really care whether you put the room out first or did the jacks first, because there was so much slot. The new stuff, these right here, maybe 3/8 of an inch. So you have to do it in a certain procedure. You have to do one before you do the other, or else you could buy new rooms. So that's why they separate them, so you can't operate them at the same time. You run the jacks down, you get the coach level, then you run your rooms out, because the box is square. If you do it backwards, you can get the box out of square, it's going to accelerate a bad situation really fast. So you can, if you've got two people doing it, but it's bad for two reasons. Verstehen Sie das?
Yeah.
Sehr gut. Yes, sir.
Similar question, but maybe smaller loads. On the 12-volt system, say I've got some 12-volt lights running, and my water pump comes on, and my lights dim. Is that just the way a 12-volt system is, or is that telling you I'm fully charged?
What kind of a coach do you have?
It's still the carriage.
Fifth wheel?
Yeah.
Still a carriage. That hurt. I actually have a job on top of this, and it kind of draws my brain a bit, but that's all right. You can pick on me. I'm tough. I'm okay. So the gentleman's question is, his lights dim when his pump comes on, and it's all his 12-volt loads. Back in the day when we were building carriages, they were really, really good coaches, but their systems weren't as sophisticated as they are today. Yeah, the water pump runs about 6 amps, 7 amps when it comes on. You had incandescent lights and things that took a lot of current, and back when they were building that, they were using ferroresonant converters that could not respond fast enough. So there's a lot of things going on. If you were to come in and tell me about that and ask me what my opinion was, I'd say it's a issue with the age of the coach. Your wiring is not as heavy duty and robust as the new ones. Your connections may be an issue. You need to convert to LED lights, one or two at a time.
Yeah.
Is that those LEDs, he'll tell you that story, they get really bright and you can overwhelm your coach. So you gotta take a little bit of time, but
Now, see, on the service side, if you were to come in, we would also tell you that, but we would go right to your connections. Because usually, if they just flicker for a quick second, usually that's kind of normal and can still happen in a lot of the newer stuff. But if it actually draws it down, then usually what we find is you've got a ground issue or a loose wire somewhere between the battery, the converter, or you have a battery with a dead cell.
This is more just a flicker.
Just a flicker. Flicker was kind of common, but if it draws it down and it stays down, and then when the pump shuts off, everything is bright again 25 seconds later. Usually it was a dead cell, a bad ground, a dirty connection at the battery. Usually we look at that. But just a quick flicker, it could be, what year is it? It's got to be,
No break.
yeah. You see, I have an 08. I like my, I still swear some of the older RVs were better. But my 08 Montana, it flickers. And as I went to LEDs, that stopped the flicker.
These are LED lights.
They are.
We just got a fairly new Zentrix inverter on it, so it's not the original stuff.
Yeah, if it's a quick flicker, I wouldn't worry about it. So if it draws down and stays down, then we've got a short or something going on.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
I just have a quick question. You said something about changing to LEDs, 1 or 2 at a time?
Well, I'll tell you that story.
I mean,
Here, about 10 years ago, they come out and they were about $4,000 a piece.
Yeah.
lights down.
That's what it seemed like at the time. Now you can get them for 12 cents. They're
Yes.
way less expensive now. But I thought, oh, these are going to be so cool. As I go out hunting, and this is going to be wonderful.
Yeah.
So I went out here and I bought about a 40 pack of bright white LED bulbs. I went in and put them all in and flipped all the switches on and then had to run around with my sunglasses on. Because bright white was too bright.
Okay.
So over the years I've changed, I put those in certain areas, but I've gone to a cool light.
Okay.
Because there's nothing worse than walking into my toilet room at 3 in the morning, flipping that light on. Yeah. So if you're gonna do it,
So the
Be
issue is
gentle.
for your eyes.
for your eyes.
Okay.
Plus now that LED's been out for a while, they have done research and found that LEDs actually mess up your sleep patterns. So
Really?
if you have too many LEDs, or they're too bright, then it affects your serotonin, something to do with your sleep. So they have now started saying that to leave an incandescent bulb on somewhere, it throws off the light waves, the UV, red, blue. He knows all the scientific part of it. Then it changes the lighting so that it doesn't mess with your brain and your sleep patterns. But yeah, that was the brightest Montana. It was bright. Almost blue, it's like blue bright. I don't know if that makes sense. I mean, it was,
So light doesn't blue, yeah. Like
Yeah.
headlights in cars.
yeah,
Basically the same thing.
yeah, I put them in an instant.
They now make them in soft.
Soft, yeah, that's what I put. Well, they made them back then too, soft white or warm white.
Yeah.
And I've changed them all, but a couple, especially my reading light over my bed. The warm or soft white, I still read a book. I don't do it on my phone like everybody else. But I like to have it in my hand. So, yeah, that's my story on LEDs. They're great, just,
Thank you.
yeah.
it's a good story.
Yeah.
So we're moving into the topic that I give every seminar, and that is what's the difference in batteries? This is the heart of your electrical system, and if you had major drawdown flickers, we would check your wiring, and we'd also check your batteries. And also the type of battery plays into this also. If you have a tow vehicle, it's got a starter battery. That battery's got a lot of plates, a lot of surface area. It's designed to discharge rapidly and recharge rapidly. In the coach side, you have deep cycle batteries. lot less plates, they're thicker like me. They're designed to discharge slowly over a long period of time and then recharge slowly over and over again. If you have a starter battery and you try to use it as a deep cycle and you cycle it down to 11 volts, you do that 3 or 4 times and you're buying a new battery. They cannot handle a deep discharge because their frames of their plates are typically cardboard. So if you discharge too much of the plate, then there's nothing to re-electroplate to. On the other side, in the coach battery, deep cycle, the frames are some kind of metal, whether it's an aluminum nickel mixture or whatever, but they're always there. They won't react in the normal battery, lead, sulfuric acid, lead sulfate, electrons, but they will accept a replating of the lead. So you could discharge a deep cycle battery to 11 volts, which is below the dead battery, and then recharge it again. And it won't hurt it nearly as bad. The average deep cycle battery in a flooded cell, which is sulfuric acid and lead, that flooded cell battery can handle 150, 175 duty cycles. Discharge, recharge, discharge, recharge. When you get into absorbed glass mat batteries, they can about triple the duty cycle. The AGM absorbed glass mat battery is a fiberglass pouch impregnated with the sulfuric acid in kind of a gel solution, and the plates build. So the sulfuric acid is held right there next to the lead plate, and so they're not going to end up sulfating as easily or as much. They just last a lot longer. They're more robust because they're just held together. So AGMs, 2 to 3 times the price, last 2 to 3 times as long, but the benefit is lack of maintenance, and they have much better service. If you have solar, or if you have a coach with an inverter, the inverters demand a lot more current than you would normally use, because now you're powering the microwave, the TV, and things like that with an inverter, so you're demanding a lot more current. The AGMs are a much more robust battery. They're a much more durable battery. They will do a much better job in that environment. Flooded cells are a good average battery, but they won't work as long. Yes, sir?
Is it good to draw down your deep cycle batteries and bring them back up? Is that good for the battery, or do you want to keep them charged?
I'm sorry, I'm deaf.
Is it good for the deep cycle batteries to draw them down and bring them back up on a regular basis, or do you want to keep them charged all the time?
Very good question. The question the gentleman has is it good to discharge the batteries once in a while and then bring them back up, or is it better to leave them fully charged? He has his opinions, I have mine. I'll give you mine, and he'll beat me to death with his. So the first thing is, if you grew up in Idaho, you know that it gets cold. And a fully charged battery is lead and sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid freezes at like minus 65. If you have a discharged battery, like at 11 volts, it's going to be lead sulfate and water. Freezes at 32 degrees. So in the wintertime, if your battery's discharged, it's going to really struggle, and it's not going to make it. It's going to swell up. No good. Done. The other thing is it's just like with a refrigerator. If your RV, you don't use it a lot, but you leave it plugged in, you leave the refrigerator on, he says there's no problem with that, no, just go ahead. I'm saying don't do it. So we have different attitudes on that. In my opinion,
Everywhere you go, somebody's going to have a different, every campfire you go to, the next 10 years, somebody's gonna tell you something different. All we can tell you is the 70 years, I've only been doing this 5 years, so. He looks good for 112.
You got a lot of
We're gonna tell
experience.
you our versions, not that either one of them's wrong, just what we have seen in his time doing this and my time. I have been mainly service tech, service related.
I'm not sure what I've been doing.
No, he's the brains. He'll tell you all about electromotive force and the light rays off the solar panel. And I mean, he is heavy into the operation of it. And I'm heavy into what I've seen in the shop. So it's not that either one of us is wrong. It's like my dad used to say, there's two ways to do things, my way and my way.
So to answer your question, my way is you want to keep that battery fully charged but not overcharged. In the flooded cells, the wet batteries, they have a sulfation problem. And a sulfation problem occurs when they sit at low voltage for too long, is that lead sulfite binds into little rocks and sits down in the sediment tray in the bottom of the battery, and then it's hard to break that. You have to hypercharge that battery to break that lead sulfate rock to get it back into solution. So, yeah, the older ones, they used to desulfate and blah, 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 but keep the battery charged.
So what happens when you're plugged into shore power for 4 or 5 months at a time? What's happening in there? Is there a maintenance procedure that you want to use?
I'll go over that next.
Okay.
I'll go over the whole, 'cause that's my theory. I keep mine plugged in all the time.
Well, you want to explain that to me?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Started to and then interrupted me. We have one of those relationships. It's almost like we're married.
Almost.
Almost.
So,
Anyways, I keep mine plugged in all the time. But it requires more maintenance. You need to get yourself on a schedule. Check it every 3 or 4 weeks. Check your foots, your battery, especially if you have a lead acid battery. You'll get to where you'll know. If anybody's ever had a car long enough, you only have to look at the fuel gauge. You know about when you're a quarter tank. So if you check it every 3 weeks and there's no water change, check it in 4 weeks and 5 weeks. And when you start seeing that change and it was at 6 weeks, the next time check it at 6. If it's right where it was, you need to add a little. You'll get on that schedule to where you need it. The best part about AGM is you never have to check it. But you pay for that right not to check it. But if you keep your fluid level up, your converter will go to a float charge where it will stop charging, stop evaporating, and it's just like it's basically almost unplugged. And it will only kick back on when needed. So if you store it someplace that you can do that, I like to leave it plugged in. You unplug for a while and unplug in and unplug. He doesn't let them go down, but he staggers his.
well, in my own defense, if I may, it's okay, right?
Yeah.
So to answer your question, it depends on the age of your coach. The older converters, they would just keep charging until the battery is absolutely destroyed. In that case, I would say, yeah, leave it on for a maximum of 2 weeks and then undo it. And that way you don't worry about, that thing putting 17 volts into your battery. If you have a 12 or newer, 8 or I think that was
Yeah, I was gonna say probably 8.
8 or newer.
6, 7, 8, right in there, depending on that.
We started seeing the spark converters. Spark converters have built-in volt charge, but when they see the back EMF, the potential at the battery, when they start seeing that potential at 14 and a half, 14, they start shutting down. So the newer stuff, you can plug in and walk away for 3 months, and you're fine. The older stuff, that's where we got into it. I've been in this industry so long that back when I started, they were just starting to use battery charge no such thing as a converter. And they would put Schwab battery chargers in there. And if you didn't unplug it every couple of days, you would flat destroy those things because they would give it everything they got until there was nothing left. So,
They weigh about 700 pounds.
yes.
They were
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
So the secret is, one of the best upgrades you can do if you like the older units, upgrade your converter.
Yeah.
They're not that much. Usually, back then, most of them were standalones, so we just had to find it, boom, bang, out. An upgraded converter is just a great maintenance item.
The new smart converters are well worth it. Yes,
Now,
sir.
on the AGM batteries, you can put them anywhere, they don't have to be vented, right?
Nope, you can put them upside down, sideways.
It's bigger, isn't it, than the other?
Well, this is a 6-volt deep cycle. This is a 12-volt, so they have the same footprint, but it's an inch and a half taller.
Oh, but it looked like it was wired. Now, same footprint?
Always need to go for the same size battery.
Yeah.
If you're replacing that battery, it'll be the same.
So the,
Yes, 2 6s for, replace 2 12s with 2 6s, if you have height. Sometimes where we run into the problem is some of the campers, for some reason, they build everything so tight in the camper, the battery doors on the side, and you can just barely get your batteries in. So sometimes, I won't mention the manufacturers, but some of them short you just enough so that we can't do those.
Mine's under the steps, I'm not sure.
You probably
yes,
have.
young lady.
So, does this conversation apply to inverters, which I think you said trailers have, or is it
Well,
converter?
That's converters.
Yeah.
You want me to do the inverter-converter talk since you
Go ahead.
Okay, so, does everybody know the difference between an inverter? I better stand up. I've been sitting too long. Okay, inverter, converter. They have inverters, they have converters, and they have inverter chargers, or what we used to call converters. So if you have a towable unit, and it's not a higher line like a carriage was back then, you're going to have a converter. 110 volts is going to come into it, and it's going to convert down to 12 volts. I call it 12 volts. It actually is 12 volts. It's going to charge somewhere 13.4 to 13.6, depending. It could even go up a little higher. You'll hear us say 12.6 is a full battery. They'll actually charge higher because it needs to charge that rate in order to get the amperage of your battery. It's a false voltage. If you were to unplug your motorhome trailer, you'd see your battery sitting at like 13.2. If you ran your water pump for about 15 seconds, you'd see it drop right to 12.6. So,
Converter does not run any of the 110 appliances.
nope, and the converter does nothing for your 110 appliances. And the inverter does. So, an inverter does just the opposite. It takes your 12 volt out of your batteries, takes it in through a bunch of relays and all sorts of weird stuff that he could probably tell you the numbers on and everything. I just know if I stick 12 volts and 110 doesn't come out, it's broke. So it takes 12 volts in, turns it to 110 volts, and sends it to either a sub panel or your breaker panel to certain breakers. And that is usually a couple of receps, usually always the entertainment center, and depending on the size of the inverter, the microwave. So, yeah.
Well, we have a 2018 Winnebago, and in one of our bays, it has a slot for an inverter, but it's plugged. It doesn't have an inverter. So
Okay.
none of our 110s will work without a generator
Right.
or electric shore power.
Yep.
And so
It's an option you can add.
we can add it.
Yeah, we can add an inverter to anything.
How much?
We put them in tent trailer. Oh, you'd have to get with Dan.
Oh, okay.
You'd have to look at it because every unit has a different floor plan, everybody has different needs. We have people come walking through the door and they say, I need an inverter, but I need it to run both my air conditioners, my refrigerator, and all this and that. And Dan says, okay, that'll be about $50,000. We can pull that off. Actually, I just need to run my TV. Okay, there's a big difference. So without the knowledge, people come in and their buddy down in Arizona at the campfire told them, oh, I get an inverter, it's the greatest thing in the world. It is great. But inverter is actually emergency 110 power. That's all it was ever designed for. It was designed for if you were at a park where they didn't have power, or parked at your buddy's house, and you stay up late with the heat on, and you want to cook a hot pocket and watch a little TV, and you can't plug in, you can't run the generator, you go over, flip this, it inverts 110 volt power, you open a beer, hot pocket, watch David Letterman, and you're good. It was for short time, emergency power only. A lot of the stuff was designed for sailboats and boats, inverters, hydronic heating, your shore cord. They call it a shore cord for a reason. They were a ship to shore cord. Even in trailers where they're hardwired in, we still call it a shore cord. But on a big motorhome, well, these now have big electric winding rails, but on a big motorhome, you plug them in like an old boat. So an inverter takes 12 volt, inverts it to 110, shoots it out to where you want it. Now, the converter, when you plug in, charges your batteries. An inverter, converter charger, an inverter charger, when you plug in, turns itself around so that it turns into a charger at that point, and a converter. So when you plug in, your inverter that you could have used comes on, reverses direction, takes 110 volt power, sends 12 volt back into your batteries as a charger. So it's kind of confusing, but you know, one way or the other. And an inverter charger, if you have one, is really, that's top notch. That's what, it used to be only Highlines had them. Now we're seeing them in, now we have a lot of Highline fifth wheels that have LED refrigerators, low amperage, low amperage microwaves, convections. So we're seeing a lot of 2,000 to 3,000 watt inverters that will run a lot in an RV.
LED refrigerators?
LED
Just
refrigerators.
the lighting in it or
The whole refrigerator, 1.5 amps.
Wow.
And they're household refrigerators.
They're only
$4
$4,000.
They're only, how much?
$4,000.
4, I was gonna say 5. They're only $4 grand. That's like a week's pay for dinner. But no, LED refrigerators, 1.5 amps.
Put
It's,
that in writing.
yeah. And I turned my phone off, so it's not recording. So, any questions on converters, inverters? I'm kind of the guy on that. Like I say, I can tell you what it does. He can tell you the name of the relay and, yeah.
Back to Gary.
You're a funny guy.
And then I got a question for you, I can carry after that.
I can't remember the term that I want, but the supercharge to resulfate your wet battery. I understand on AGMs, you don't want to use that cycle.
Absolutely do not.
No, and if you change to an AGM battery, if your inverter is new enough, we go in and we reprogram it so it'll never do that. And usually what you're talking about was called, when it's superpowered.
Yeah.
Equalize it.
Yeah.
Usually the inverter's had, it's been so long since I've done that, I forgot. Usually that's a separate button. It won't ever do it unless you hit the equalize button on your inverter panel. Equalizing basically just super cooks a battery. It's hard to explain. It's like putting your dishwasher on super hot and leaving it on for 4 times longer than usual. It just, yeah. It's either gonna equalize your batteries and save them, or you'll know at the end of the process that they're bad. So speaking about dead batteries, since he's gone to batteries, what we get a lot of the time is we have people come in with 2 batteries in their fifth wheel or trailer, or 4 in their RV, and they'll say, yeah, I know I got 1 bad battery I need to replace. replace it. We won't do that here. We'll give you an estimate for 4 batteries, or you can,
Buy a battery and do it yourself.
yeah. Basically what happens is if you have one bad battery, your converter or inverter sees that bad battery, sees it as a bad zone. So it's supercharging that battery gets warm, it's bad. So in turn, you put a new one in, the inverter or converter sees your other 3 batteries as a bad zone. It starts charging them at a higher rate, your new battery starts to get depleted. So basically all you're doing is playing this merry-go-round of ruining your batteries. So if you get one bad battery, I hate to say it, you need to replace every one of them. And we get guys that come in and they throw a fit, and I tell them, I'll sell it to you, but I'm not warranting this battery. Because you're taking a brand new battery and treating it like this one over here that's at 50%. So instantly that battery turns into a half-used battery the second you put it on. So, very important. Any more questions on batteries?
Not on batteries. Well, basically, on the older coaches,
Yeah.
on an converter, if you overcharge a battery, can you disconnect the battery so it'll overcharge it and still use your 110 in the coach?
Yes.
No.
Well, your 110, you mean when you're plugged in?
Yeah, plugged in, without a battery.
Yes. Because it actually does more than just charge the battery. It sends power up to your main control panel where your fuses are.
It's a power supply.
It's a power supply. It cleans up the voltage. Now, what you won't be able to do, his question is, I'm just going to use a fifth wheel, because it's the same thing.
That's what it's in here.
It's okay. Fifth wheel. You could plug it in and take the batteries out and lay them on the floor and never have a battery in that ever, except for the power then coming from your converter is supplying, there's no amperage behind it. So in turn what would happen is if you turned your water pump on, you would definitely see the lights go way down. And you would never probably be able to run a slide room in or run jacks because you don't have that fuel tank of amperage. But yeah, when we PDI a lot of these little 20-foot trailers, it's easier for us just to run up to the front where the battery cables are, put some tape over them, plug it in, do all of our testing, check the charge out rate, and say, great, we never have to hook a battery up. And you can, and we see a lot of people, full-timers, that they'll be at the park and they're like, we're having issues, we're getting this and that, and we don't know why. Must be something wrong with our plug-in or our 110 volts. Well, no, it's because they haven't checked the batteries for 10 years. We open the bay and they're swelled up like a football, they're bad, they're steaming. Everything still kind of works, it's just different. So you can run it without.
One more thing before we get to her. The other issue is the power supplies, converters that we use in our industry, they use the battery as a final capacitor. So and a filter. So the converter as a standalone power supply, you're not going to see quite as much voltage. You may see an output of 12.5 volts instead of 13.5. So the lights won't be as bright. And you'll have a lot of fluctuation, and you'll get a lot of AC spike in it, and it won't be nearly as clean a power. They design their power supplies to be used with a battery, but not necessarily. You can get away without it. And then you had a question?
I just have a question. So in the winter when we're in Arizona, we are on shore power the whole time.
Oh, it sounds terrible.
Yeah, it's rough. But the question is, we want to run our generator about once a month just to get the fluid moving and et cetera, and not have it just sit there because we boondock a lot on our way down and way back up there. So does it matter that we leave our shore power plugged in when we run the generator for that half hour, 45 minutes?
You want? Looks like you're contemplating.
Yeah. The lady's question is it okay to leave the coach plugged in while you're exercising your generator.
Or just turn off the batteries while we run the generator?
You don't need to turn the batteries off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Maybe I heard that wrong, but I'll answer the question I thought I heard. And the answer is, if you have a generator built into your coach, fifth wheel, motorhome, the power comes in through a relay switch. This switch prioritizes the generator so that if you have it plugged into 110 and you start the generator, it'll drop out the 110 from the short cord, and then it'll only bring the power in from the generator. So once it gets through the transfer switch, it's the same 110 going to the converter and everything else. It's just a protective input. It can only allow one or the other. It cannot allow both.
I have seen them allow both.
You have what?
I have actually seen that transfer switch mess up and allow both to
Yeah,
happen at
that
the same time.
concerned us.
Then you have a 240 volt situation, and yeah, you can get up.
My question is about solar.
Good.
And,
Finally.
yeah, I mean, we can use generators and all that, but I'm more trying to, anyway, how much power of solar, how many amps do I need to charge the batteries? Because we bought one just a little, I don't know how many amps it puts out, not much. It never really charged the batteries. So. How many amps of solar power do I need to charge the batteries?
We're into solar panels now. I'll take a seat.
Yeah, he's gonna go take a nap. So the question is how much solar is required to charge your batteries? So I'm a firm believer in solar. We sell ZAMP made in Bend, Oregon. They actually build their panels in Bend, Oregon. They're not Chinese. They're very good quality, American made. Okay, enough for the plug. Good stuff. ZAMP, Z-A-M-P. The first thing that Dave will tell you, if somebody calls up, they send the people to me, and it's a very personal situation because every coach is different, everyone's needs are different. Solar panels are battery chargers. The misnomer is that the small panels actually work. Several manufacturers put a small, it's about 12-inch by 12-inch panel on top of their air conditioners. Back when Winnebago first started putting that little panel on top of their roof AC, they were bragging that their coach had solar. We actually did a test on it. The solar panel puts out like 0.14 amps at about 13 volts. It goes through an LED to show that it's working, and that little red LED on the side of the ceiling assembly of the air conditioner is the indicator, and then it drops down to the battery. So by the time you take into account the resistance through the LED and then down through the small wire they run, that 0.1 whatever amp is in the milliamps. So in theory, yeah, they work, but they don't. So the answer to the question is you actually need a fairly decent sized panel because they all put out quite a bit of potential. These panels are rated at 17, 18, 19 volts, but it's the amount of current they actually put out is the part that's important. And batteries require, well, I'm going to say it this way. This 12-volt battery right here is 80 amp hours. It is designed to handle a deep cycle 1/3 of its capacity per hour in a charge. So if this is 80, you should be able to charge 25, 30 amps an hour into this. The slower you charge it, the less efficient and the poorer the charge is. It takes a pretty good potential to break up the lead sulfate. We found through the years that if you're trickle charging all the time, your batteries tend to sulfate years before and fail years faster than the guy that charges with a good amount of current. So if you look at it, let's say you've got 4 batteries. You can put over 100 amps per hour into those 4 batteries in a charge. If you're doing 5 amps an hour because you have one small panel, if you ever do fully charge the batteries, the battery condition is going to suffer greatly because it's not really getting sufficient amount of current. The minimum panel that we install for 2 batteries is 160, now 170 watts, and that's close to 10 amps. And that's for 2 batteries, and that's pretty minimal. And it actually, solar's cool because these things have a 25-year warranty, and all you do is clean them off a little bit a couple times a year, and they last, and they go, and you can swap it from coach to coach. But you've got to have a pretty good amount of current. You've got to have a pretty good amount of solar. It all depends on your system. I've done this for so long, and I'm really into it, so you come and talk to me, and we look at your system and what you want to do with it, and I'll tell you, I can show you the minimum requirements. But it's quite a bit of current. If you have more than 2 batteries, you're going to have more than 1 panel. And yours probably isn't big enough to really do anything anyway. Somebody over here was, yeah.
Just for maintaining your batteries, would 1 panel like that work for 2 batteries? When it's just going to be sitting there for...
Eventually, more or less, but it'll...
Or is it going to sulfate up because you're not...
Yeah, you're never getting enough of a potential to actually... Lead sulfate is a fairly stable rock, and it settles out like dirt in the bottom of your battery box. And it takes a good amount of current for that to break up that lead sulfate. And so if you're, let's say you have a small panel that puts out 0.5 amp an hour, eventually it'll fairly well charge. You'll see 12.5 volts, but you will never see more than about 70-80% charge because it just doesn't have the potential to break up the lead sulfate to get you into a 100%
I have a
charge.
panel about that size, and I just use it for maintaining. So would I be better off with the unit plugged in, or with the solar panel, or?
When these manufacturers...
You have one this size?
Yeah, maybe a little bit bigger.
This is, I think, a 40. And
That's not really bad. As long as you're don't have a bunch of usage, that should maintain.
I mean, there's a controller
As
on
long
the
as you
battery.
plug it in
It's
to
30 volts.
Yeah, as long as you plug it in to get it up to full charge, and then unplug it and leave this, you should maintain. But if you're elk hunting, and you're down to 8 volts,
Okay.
and then you just expect this to get you back up, you'll
So
never get there.
maintaining it at 13 would be fine, but if it drops down, you want to charge it pretty quick.
Right.
this is a 60-watt panel. I'm a purist, so to me, if you don't have about 10 amps per battery, you're never going to achieve a full charge. So a maintainer, that dog don't hunt for me. I don't believe in that because I've seen so many systems that are inadequate that you think you're getting, but in the middle of the night everything crashes because there just isn't enough potential in the batteries to do it. But,
So if you have 4 batteries, you should have a solar system that would provide
yeah,
48.
the solar panels have to be balanced with the batteries. If you don't have enough batteries, then you don't have enough capacity. If you don't have enough solar, if you're long-term dry camping, your condition of your batteries is going to just deteriorate. And the longevity of that battery, its life is going to go down enormously. The potential from a converter is so much greater. It's able to put out 35 to 60 amps. And that kind of, 15, 16, 17 volts at 30 amps, that's what it takes to actually charge these batteries. If you look at the physical chemistry of a battery, this is an 80 amp hour battery when it's brand new, this 12 volt group 24. To put 80 amps back in a dead battery takes about 120, 130 amp hours. So it's not really that efficient, but if your solar can't provide that, you'll never get there. So
Just a partner.
Rule of thumb, sir, one solar panel per battery.
well, it depends on the size, but the big solar panels, they've become more and more efficient because they're now using blue and green light to stimulate the emission of that little cell, of that solar cell. So they're more efficient. So what was a 100 watt panel was 150, 160, and now they're 170 watts. So they're getting more efficient. One 170 watt panel will put out over 10 volts, and that's enough for 2 batteries because they put out the new stuff's like 19 volts. This one was 19.38. That's pretty good potential, and that'll do it. So the rule of thumb is at least 1 panel per 2 batteries. You know, and they have to be a good panel. They can't be the little tiny ones.
So say you want 150 watts for 2 batteries in.
Yes, somewhere in that area. Yes.
Does it also charge your chassis battery?
Is it also hard to
Is
work?
it going to charge your chassis battery or just your coach batteries?
The young lady was asking if does the solar panel charge the coach battery or just the house batteries? And it depends on the charge controller. When we install solar panels, it goes through a charge controller. So because these things will put out 19.5 volts all day long, and just like a old style converter, they have to be shut down. So we need that charge controller in there to shut that down. Some of the charge controllers have an output. Once the potential at their main battery bank is at a certain potential, then it switches over and opens up this other circuit that is designed to wire into the chassis battery. And that's a lot like the circuit, these relays that Dave Taylor is going to talk about next, that do the same thing. But you can get a charge controller that will also bridge over into the chassis. It's a little bit more money, but you know, it's doable and they work really well. Yes, sir.
So with that theory there, with bi-directional relay, allow the same process? Yep, we're gonna go over those in just a second. That's my favorite thing to talk about, other than food. If you were here for if you come back for the 101, you get to hear me talk about food.
Do those work in the woods in the Willamette Valley and on cloudy days?
The lady, I paid her actually to ask that question. The solar panels work in the Willamette Valley in the woods
On a cloudy day.
on a cloudy day.
While it's snowing.
While it's snowing. And your mother-in-law's coming over. So, if you're parked under a tree and there's a branch about a foot above it, a phenomenon of these things, that branch will, that shadow right here would shut this panel off. I used to have a display that was, we could roll it out into the parking lot, and it had a solar panel on it, a couple batteries, an inverter, and a microwave, and I'd roll it out there and we'd cook lunch just out in the parking lot off this thing. And one time I laid my hand over it like this, voltage output dropped down to 0. So they don't like to be shadowed. If you're just in filtered light, like in the fir trees and in the pines, when we do solar systems, I tend to like to oversell. If you look at we used to do what's called energy audits. Okay, we're using the water pump this long, we're using this many lights, we're running the fridge, we're going to consume, and then we realize, oh, everybody does about the same thing. People consume about 50 to 75 amp hours a day. So you match your solar to that output. So if I need 75 amp hours, that means that if I run it in 8 hours of sunlight, I need this many solar panels. That works great in the summertime when you have a day like today, but when you're in the woods and it's snowing, your mother-in-law's coming, you need more. So what we recommend is twice as much. These are only as efficient as the amount of radiation that they can absorb. When you're in filtered light, there's not as much radiation. Another thing, way back in the beginning, these panels were designed with bracketry. So you crawled up on the roof and you parked your coach so that it was, the one side was facing south, and then you got up to about 32 degrees is the angle of incidence in the summertime when the radiation comes in, strikes it square on, and it's most efficient. But that was in the 80s. Nowadays, we just lay them flat about 2 inches off the deck because the crystal structure is so much more advanced. It absorbs, it's like lens optics, and it absorbs the light, and it's so much more efficient. We don't want you up on the roof, and you don't need to angle them anymore. You just need to buy more than you need so that you have enough current when it's overcast and snowing and you're in the filtered light. But they're about half as efficient. If you could do 10 amps per hour on a day like today, in the deepest, darkest forest, you're probably going to be 3 to 4. So you just buy more panels for me. But that's how we have looked at this for years. Come on in, sit down.
Are you Lindsay?
Am I what?
Lindsay?
No, ma'am. Oh, that's not Lindsay either.
Oh, okay.
Are you looking for Lindsay?
Well, I had just discussed with him.
He's in sales over at the other building. Yeah.
Thank you.
Afterwards, I can have him come over.
No,
Okay.
I'll see you
You don't have
tonight.
money.
Thank you.
He's the guy that sells it to you, we're the guys that keep it going.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm just curious about when you're mounting them on the roof and you're traveling, I mean, are they permanently mounted? Because it used to
Well,
be, you'd see people, they plug them in and they'd be sitting on the ground in front like.
They just did that so they could point them.
Right.
No, we
But
stick
these
them
are
right on the
mounted on
roof, we stick them right on the roof, and put sealant under the legs, we mount them right down there, and they're never gonna move again unless you want them to.
Well, what if they're in a hailstorm or do they
Pretty
get
tough.
can they get damaged by hail and that sort
Let
of
me
thing?
tell you a story about that. The first panels that came into our industry were the Arco, as in Arco gasoline, back when they actually cared about the planet. Arco developed the Arco 45, and it was a pretty cool panel. It was about this high, about half this width, 45 watts. The government, they wanted to test it because they wanted to use it for the railroads for indicator signs and things like that. They tested it, put it on a metal building, and I used to have a video of them. They did everything to it. They threw hail at it, they simulated all sorts of stuff. When it was all done, the only thing left was the solar panel. The way these are built, they're very durable. I've done about 100 RV rallies, and I've worked in our booth for years, was right next to the solar panel guy. And he'd come out, and he'd get out a 100-watt panel, throw it on the ground. He'd stand on that all day during the rally, every day, never broke them. They're very durable. When we first started selling these Yamaha mate generators, you buy 2,000 and plug it into another 2,000, I was talking to the rep, and he said the #1 theft item on the market is a Honda or Yamaha companion generator, 2,000-watt generator. The #2 theft item on Craigslist is portable solar panels. So they've never really promoted them, even though they make them, because they're such a high theft item. And Dave would tell you that the way that the roof decks are designed, you have usually 3/8 plywood up there. And these Z brackets are stainless steel, they clip onto this and you bolt them on. and then you run a screw down into the deck, and you seal it, and we've done this for so many years, and the sealants and the design of the brackets are so good, we just don't have problems with it. Some people are paranoid of that because they had an old Winnebago that the roof looked like a swimming pool, but the new stuff just isn't like that. It's so much better, and the brackets and the sealants, they work very well. You want it on the roof about 2 inches off the deck, because in the middle of a day like today, you could cook eggs and bacon on this.
Yeah, they gotta have an air gap.
Yeah, they get very hot.
What does a panel like that cost more or less?
Well, one that I would sell you, $1,200 for a 170 watt panel with a charge controller, a 30 amp charge controller installed. And then the second, third panel are about 900. The panels are about 800 bucks plus labor, plus the charge controller. And typically on a system like that, you can do 3 panels. If you got a lot of money, we can do a 6-panel kit. People with the...
And then we might as well upgrade your batteries too.
Yeah.
And then when we're doing that, we might as well throw in 4,000 watt inverter.
The refrigerator, don't forget the refrigerator.
I was just waiting to see when he finally shut me down.
Don't stop now, keep going.
Yeah.
Okay, Dave, I think is ready to talk about the bi-directional relays and all of that.
Sure.
Okay. I need to
Okay.
see it.
So this gentleman back here asked about bi-directional relay. So, since he works here, I'm going to make it, what's the nickname for that bi-directional relay? It's called the bird. Bi-directional isolator relay delay.
It's written on it. That's how you know.
It does. This one does, doesn't it? Yeah, we used to call them birds. I need a bird. We got a bird now. This is the lingo. We all walk around, we act like surgeons. Okay, so one big issue we have is people come in and they say, oh, you sold us a junk coach, or my coach is messed up. We went to Arizona and parked for 4 months and I couldn't get the engine started. Well, no, you couldn't. You just let it sit there and go dead over 4 or 5 months. You either have to exercise the engine, which in turn exercises the alternator with electromotive force. It's my new favorite thing he taught me. And that charges your batteries. And you have to do that quite frequently. These things have memories, they have radios, they have all sorts of things hooked to them. And it just sits there and they will go dead. So, some manufacturers, Newmark, one of the main ones that does it now, has a bi-directional relay. This is the one they use actually. There's 3 or 4 different ones. This is a good one. We sell another one that's a little more expensive, but I consider it to be a better bi-directional relay. So bi-directional. Basically, we put this somewhere in your motorhome, right between the chassis batteries and the house batteries. This is wired so that when you come to a when you're plugged in, you have no charge going to your chassis battery. When you come to full charge on your house batteries, it tells this, hey, I'm fully charged. Why don't we kick over and charge the chassis batteries now? It charges the chassis batteries. When they're both up to full charge, it shuts off and they're doing their own thing. As long as you're plugged in, it will always basically mind your chassis battery, so that it always keeps it up. So, you're going down the road, you're unplugged. You're driving down the road, your chassis battery is fully charged. This will kick over and charge your house battery. It will go bi-directional, it keeps track of your 2 batteries, checks the voltage. So that's what a bi-directional does. We used to call them green brick at Monaco. See, I'm getting old, I'm forgetting stuff. It was the directional, but it had the heat sinks on it. It had the red light. We used to call it $1,000 brick with a light. Yeah. Safaris had it too. Chassis, house, and the post in the middle. You're gonna think about this all day.
I am.
Tonight, I know.
It's one of those products that thank God went away. I mean,
Yeah.
It got better.
It got way better. Now it's just these. It used to be what we called a $1,000 brick with a red light. And it worked, probably 10% of the time, it worked 100% of the time. So, somebody actually got that. So,
All coaches have that.
nope,
No.
Winnebago does not, Thor does not, maybe some of the higher line Thors.
I had one of those to charge the house batteries and the chassis batteries and an old sports coach. And I had that on there built on. I know it went bad, so I had to replace it, but yeah.
Yeah, it was probably, if it was the old sports coach, it might have been one of the heat sink ones that was
Right,
old
right.
Winnebago.
Oh, yeah.
And they had a higher failure rate,
Right.
but they worked.
Yeah, they do
They
work.
work. So if you have that issue, let this guy know, or whatever dealership you want to go to, wherever you trust, and they can get you all set up. But yeah, the new Mars have this in every unit they sell. Winnebago, like I say, I'm sure when you get up to the big diesels, they've got something fancy in there, but most of the smaller Thor Aces, smaller stuff, no, it's not in there. It's just one of those things. It's with RVing, a lot of it's personal preference and easeability. And if you don't mind starting your motor home every two weeks to run it for a half hour to exercise everything and keep your battery charged, is great. Or you can spend the $200 to $400 and never have to worry about starting it again. Kind of like AGMs. They last a lot longer, but they're still just a battery. So if you don't mind the other batteries, you want to maintain them, do all that, great. But these, you don't. Yeah.
And my rig has what's called an echo charge. It just takes off the coach batteries when they're above 13 volts.
Yeah, that's just out of the early versions of the smart chart.
The smart
They
chart.
were good. They were good.
What kind of motor you have, Monaco or a?
Country coach.
I was gonna say, Monaco Country Coach, Beaver uses that.
They did, yeah. And you have the great big AD batteries.
That's what it came with. I wanted lighter ones.
Good.
Yeah, I remember 8Ds.
Yeah.
Took two guys bigger than me to put them in. Batteries that big.
You had
Seemed
to
like
do
it.
it on Marine.
Huh?
I did it on Marine, they were a lot harder to get in.
Oh yeah.
Find your engine room with it.
Yeah, big batteries. Okay, any more questions on charging, inverters? We kind of, believe it or not, went all over. We usually go right down this line. But you guys started asking enough questions that made it fun, so we're all over this thing. So the best thing to do is look on here and say, Dan, what about this? Surge protector. Surge protector? Greatest thing in the world. Oh, you're here to make a hint?
Yeah, I'm trying to move on.
Really? I've been trying to move on for years. Surge protector is the best thing you ever spend money on. It's insurance.
So, he and I have been doing this together for so long. In the beginning, this is one of the things that we could never agree on. And after about 4 or 5 years, I finally softened up enough to understand his logic. I agree with him. So
Can I get that
anyway,
in the morning?
that. So anyway, surge protectors. You're sitting in a nice campground in a small town in rural Oregon, and some young guy's had a little too much to drink, and his new Camaro ends up in the top of a power pole, and the transformer starts putting out 11,000 volts, which is the incoming line voltage on these power lines. That 11,000 volts drops down, comes right into our campground, right through your shore cord, and fries everything that's electronic in your coach. Surge protectors are this little deal that we install after the shore cord, before the transfer switch, before it gets into your coach. Or if you want a portable one that you forget and leave for the next guy and he never thanks lights, you can have the portable one right there at the power pole. What these do is they're a fuse. And what makes them good or bad is the amount of current in joules that they can absorb while they're melting down. We sell surge protectors for 75, 80 bucks, and they got like 980 joules. This one is 300, and it's got, I believe, 3,800 joules.
Didn't do your homework, did you?
No, I don't have my glasses on. I think it's 3,800 joules. The higher the joule rating, and this is about as high as you can get, and this is a very good unit. The higher the joule rating means the larger the amount of current that this will hold while it's melting down. So the cheap one, it's going to melt down, but 3/4 of your appliances are now shot. These will melt down, save pretty much everything in the coach. Usually, okay, I'm going to say it this way, rarely will we find a failed electronic piece if these are installed. I used to argue that, you know, your RV insurance has like a $500 deductible in case you run into somebody or something. It's the same thing. If you have a catastrophic electrical failure, your RV insurance covers it. Whatever your deductible is, you pay that. And that deductible is about the same price as this installed. So I said, you know, hey, some people are gamblers. Why bother paying for this when the probability of this happening is very low? And for 4 to 5 years, Dave Taylor used to say, okay, you're out on a vacation. You've got 2 weeks. You've been saving for it for 10 years. You're 3 days out. You're 500 miles from home, and you get zapped. Now you got to leave the coach, go do something else, come back 5 weeks later when they finally rebuilt your coach, and you're only out 500 bucks. And I got to thinking about that, and after quite a few years, I agreed with you.
I think you can come to the dark side.
So anyway, this is what surge protectors do. They protect your coach. They're just a fuse, a fast blow that absorbs a lot of current so it doesn't mess with your coach.
And what do you charge to put that in?
Why don't the manufacturers put them in to begin with?
Because
it costs money.
happens so seldom. It does. It doesn't happen a lot. For as big a dealership as we are, we have probably 3 a year, but we're only one dealership. If you count the dealerships as big at 3 a year, that's a very small percentage. But it's like your car. The thing never breaks out of your driveway. You're always miles from home in the worst spot. I've seen a lot of people leave their motorhomes and fly home, throw all their food in the garbage, because we can't store it, throw all their food in the garbage, take everything in their dog, load on a plane and fly back to California or wherever they're going, and then fly back out in 5 to 10 weeks when we get new televisions and control boards, and we had to wait 6 weeks for the special control board for this, and you're done. You get hit, you're done. So they don't do it because it is a very small percentage. But it's one of those things I always thought, you know what, if this was going to happen, it would happen to me. So that's how my luck was. So I just figured, I have one.
Yes, sir?
I agree with you, but I think you're also shortchanging in the other electrical testing that it does. Because while I've never had a surge problem, in 15 years I've had a number of campground electrical problems.
Correct. Reverse polarity,
Low voltage,
open neutrals.
So,
Yeah, a lot of them will actually have lights on there that will test and tell you. Believe it or not, you can run on reverse polarity. It's just not good to. So not only does it protect you, you can let the park know, hey, you've got an issue there.
If you're running reverse polarity, don't hook your dog to the assist handle.
Do they wear out over time? When mine's 14 years old, is that the problem?
I've never remember one wearing out unless it got hit with electricity. We just installed one, matter of fact, she just called yesterday, I can't think, her name was McKinney or something. We just installed one, walked the unit here 2 weeks ago. Believe it or not, they went to Uncle Jimmy's house and plugged it into his welding outlet. And she called and said, now what? Well, you get to buy a second one. And they went to a local shop wherever Uncle Jimmy was, and they just wired past it to get it. They'll be back here in 2 weeks.
So if I could, before I get there, I want to answer your question my way. For so many years, I've been selling solar panels, banks, power, suspension things, all sorts of aftermarket, especially I like cone shocks. And the reason I smiled and laughed when you asked that is because people buy a brand new coach. Excuse me. It's not so bad anymore, but for years, they would complain about the suspension issues, and I'd say, yeah, well, your coach needs this, this, and this. And they'd say, well, why didn't they do that at the factory? And I asked a factory rep once, and Ford on the gas motors back then, their Monroe shock cost Ford $16. And he said, we build a spec chassis. The manufacturer of the coach buys that chassis at a very competitive price. And he said, we're lucky we can squeeze 16 bucks into the shocks. And so if you, the customer, aren't demanding these high-end ads, they're not going to throw them in because they're competing with the other guy down the street, and they're going to cut as many corners as they can. But that's the second oldest question I've ever, in the world. I mean, it's
true. Because just over the years, in order to the cost of everything going up, the cost goes up, the quality, I'm not going to say the quality goes down, I'm just saying they cut corners. If you look at an 08 carriage, or what year was it? An 03 carriage, that thing had real wood cabinets, front to rear.
had a real floor.
And it had, they were a nice unit. They did go through slide room gears every now and again. I don't know if yours has.
Yeah, we know about that.
Being in this 30 years, I've done a lot of carriage rooms that you look at a new $100,000 fifth wheel, and the cabinet doors are wood, but they got fake panels and particle board. I mean, they look nice, but the quality just has changed. For the reason, I like my 08 Montana. It's kind of right in the middle. It has a little particle board and some real wood, but quality's still there, and I haven't found anything I like better. That's why I'm still married, too. I haven't found anything. Or I haven't found anybody that'll put up with me. That's the problem. I have a feeling that's about the same here.
No, the other one back there. The average price to put something like that in a coach is?
Say what?
The average price to install that is?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, there's $300 you said for that unit. How much does it cost roughly to put it in?
Well, it all depends on how big your credit card is, but the reality is, it depends. In some of these coaches, in the electrical bay, there's no room. So we have to go in the bay next door and then run over, and it gets to be a little expensive. But a basic install is typically 2 hours. The way Guarantee does it is we have what we call menu pricing for things like this. It's $100 an hour. If you come in because your water heater doesn't work, it's $130 an hour to tell you should have cleaned it out. But installation of this is $100 an hour, and an average install is 2 hours. It can get ugly, but rarely. And these are not that big, but the Progressive Dynamics is by far what he and the guys want to use because it's a better quality product.
ones that you built in. So do I understand, can they eventually get full, kind of like power strips do that people use? That,
No,
like a surge protector you're using with a
I don't
power
know.
strip?
there's
Who
These
you're
will get
talking
full
to, but
wall.
stop.
they don't, there's no such thing as full on these. You just plug them in line, as long as power's going through them, they're fine.
Okay,
If they break, then something's happened.
okay.
But not only for power spikes, for brownouts.
You've got like a class B or class C, right?
Hey,
You've got a class A, so you have enough room for a hardware.
Yeah.
These are not so much a high theft item, they're a high, oh God, I forgot it item.
Is that
Yeah, you left it behind, yeah.
Does that go from the short cord, between the cord and the outlet?
Yeah.
Is that where it
Yeah,
goes?
yeah, you do it right there at that little power pole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How could you forget it? You gotta-
We've seen it. Sometimes it's
I've
not.
done this 40 years, and I've only heard that story about 5 million times.
Really?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not so much you forget it, is at night when you're sleeping,
Yeah.
the guy that comes through the park
Yeah.
and notices you're not gonna notice anything, decides to take it with him. Because I'm not sure what that one is. That's how many dollars?
That's what is that, last two digits, 50?
Yeah.
Okay, it's 50.
I did see a lockbox a couple days ago.
$380.
There's a lockbox now that you can buy where you join them together.
Yeah,
And
that
you
works
can lock
really
it
good.
closed.
That works really good unless the guy that comes to the park that knows what he's coming for brings his wire cutters to cut the cable
Oh, great.
or cut the plastic around the box.
For $1, I can get out, I can take it.
How much is
Yeah,
There.
if they
How much
want
is
it,
the
they'll get
portable
to
one?
it really easy.
Okay.
How much is that portable one they'll plug in with?
$350,
I think
you
about
said?
380.
380.
And the other one is 300?
Yeah, because it doesn't have the cords and all of that stuff, it's a hardware, so.
We use
it's
your
just a
existing
box.
ones.
So, yeah, they're a lot cheaper, well, they're a little cheaper, but,
You have to pay the installers.
you,
Right.
yeah, you know, they want a lot of money for these engines.
I guess so.
I don't make this up, so that's what it is. Any last questions before I have to fulfill his contract? And he wants to talk about poop for about 10 seconds.
We just talked about this because we keep thinking, since we're on YouTube being screened or live stream, that as much as we talk good about this Hampton camper stuff, that Sunday they'll come up and buy us lunch. Because they're out of Medford. I didn't know that until here last year. He was the one that told me. This stuff is the best you'll ever find for your black and gray
I
tanks.
swear by it, it's amazing stuff.
What's it
Takes
for?
the smell away. Black and gray tanks.
Dries
Takes the
heat, like
smell
dries
away.
heat?
It cleans the probes. It
Good
I
on
just
your
can't-
waffles.
They also have
No,
an
I don't know if it's
extreme
good on
clean that's once a year, twice a year you can use.
Yeah,
Put in your tank and go for a drive.
but I believe originally somebody was telling me this was designed for septic tanks. And they kind of branched off into the RV industry. And the price is comparable. If you look around on all these desks out here, toolboxes, you'll probably find one or more of these sitting out here. We go through a lot of it.
Recommend that for the gray water as well as the black?
Yep, black and gray. Gray tank can get just as bad as a black tank.
Oh, yeah, they can.
If you ever take a P-trap off underneath the bathroom sink and look at it and see what's in it and smell it, you understand what a gray tank in an RV, they're ugly. Especially the galley gray.
Yeah.
You get a little, yeah, that runs right down into everything else. And you got body oils and you got pieces of rice-a-roni and believe me.
So would you put it down the kitchen sink then? Is that where you recommend it?
If you only have one gray tank, I would just put it in wherever you can get it down. I have a galley and a bathroom, so I put it down in the shower in the kitchen.
We
But that
all,
works well.
we also will put it down through the shower, so the P-trap, because of all the shampoo and hair.
Yeah, if you got time to let it sit for a couple days, put a little sprinkle in all your P-traps.
But mix it with hot water, because otherwise you mix it with cold water and it turns just into a big
It
lump.
turns into a clump.
Yeah.
Well, if you're stirring it this stuff, if you just throw a big scoop in your toilet bowl and walk away, when you come back, it's gonna be like concrete. I mean, it just starts, it heats up, it just sticks together. So, I do mine in my toilet bowl, I fill up my toilet bowl, and I take the toilet cleaner, pour my scoop in, stir it around, flush the toilet, and I'm done.
And it doesn't clump up in your holding tank?
No, not if you get it stirred up and moving when it,
Since we're talking really basic stuff, I have one basic electrical safety thing. At home, I do everything the girls do, plug this in, plug that in the RV. Should I not use those fragrance plug-ins, or is that a danger? I thought they said something heats up when it's not tight, sometimes they're not tight. You got oil there, so.
oh, the fragrance,
Yeah.
the fragrance heater, they're fine, it's gonna work the same as in the house.
Okay.
And it's not that they're not tight, it's just, when you get into 50 amps, when you have that many amps running through a cord, if you went to plug those two 50-amp cords together right now, sometimes it takes everything you got to put them together and take them apart. That's what you want. If your equipment or your short cord gets to the point where it just flops in the hole, it's time to get a new end. You want it tight. Those little fragrance things are 15 amp.
Yeah, but,
They're just,
I'm in an RV and I think I'm at home, so I do everything like is it better to leave, like you set up a little recharging station for everything? They're in, you've got your telephone, makeup things,
Oh, yeah.
recharge. So.
My hair dryer.
Plugs, yeah, well, I was unplugged my hair dryer.
This
That-
is
that
a
was a
cordless
joke.
dryer.
Oh, sorry. You're beautiful, I know you used all those things, but, so it's fine, just, you don't have to unplug anything.
No, you should be able, as long as you're plugging into the right amperage, you should be able to use it just like a house.
Okay.
Any other questions? We're getting a little long in the tooth here. You got about 5 minutes.
Or 30, depending. If you keep
Yeah.
asking questions, we'll
There's
keep
a few
saying it. I
strawberries
just don't
left.
wanna-
Any last questions?
I am. Did you see that she switched sides on me, so I lost by one?
Yeah. Well, I think you lost by more than one.
You had two.
So,
I gave you two.
They left them.
Well, they
All right.
anything else?
Thank you, folks, very much.
Nice to meet you all. Thank you.